Just all right. Yeah, I see it's 7:03 and we've got a number of folks who've joined us online already. So yeah, let's get going. Hi everyone. My name is Alice and I assist Councillor Leaper with the planning and development files for Kitchissippi Ward. Thanks for taking the time tonight to join us here in this virtual open house regarding the proposed rezoning for the properties at 1657 Carling Avenue and 387 Tilbury Avenue. Tonight, we're going to be hearing about a rezoning application which seeks to develop a 28-story mixed-use building with 370 residential dwelling units, 357 square meters of commercial space, 154 residential parking spaces, 30 visitor parking spaces, and 374 bicycle parking spaces. Before I do hand things off to the applicant and their team to provide further details, I'm going to start us off with some housekeeping. Number one, in terms of the format of the meeting tonight, we have the consultant team and the applicant here, as you know, and they are going to offer a presentation on the proposal. And after that, we're going to open things up to residents using the Q&A function. So please ensure that you type in your questions there, and we'll be reading them aloud based on what comes in, and we'll do our best to get to them all. And then number two, as is the practice with all our virtual open houses, the meeting will be recorded and posted on the Kitchissippi Ward YouTube channel by the end of this week. Anyone who's interested who couldn't attend tonight or who is attending and can't find the link, please just email our office and we'll share it with you. You can also just easily go onto YouTube and search for it using Kitchissippi Ward, and you should be able to find it directly that way. And just a reminder, if you aren't comfortable being recorded on video tonight, please feel free to turn off the camera on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand it over to FOTEN and the applicant team for their presentation. I'll let them introduce themselves and take it from here for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for the introduction, and thank you, Councillor, for setting up this meeting. Welcome to everyone who's decided to join online. I'm going to give a brief presentation after I introduce our team here and try to keep things high level so to allow time for discussion. If there's anything I go over too quickly that you want to raise back, simply type it in the Q&A and we can review anything here. So my name's Scott Alain. I'm a senior planner at FOTEN Planning and Design. We are the planners on the file, of course. I'm joined today by Brian Casagrande, who's a partner at FOTEN and also involved in the file. Our project architect is here. That's Julian Hebert from Project One Studio. Our transportation consultant, John Kingsley, is here from CGH Transportation. And then I'm also joined by two members of the ownership team. The site's owned by Inside Edge Properties, and I'm joined here by David Hunter and Jordan B. Anconi. So with that, I'll go through my slides here. I'm going to give a bit of the background context and planning side of things, which I realize you're likely familiar with the context, but if you'll bear with me, and then I'll pass it to Julian and he'll get into some of the more detailed elements of the proposal. So as you can see on your screen, we're developing or proposing to develop that is 1657 Carling Avenue and 386 Tilbury Avenue. So if you look on the graphic, you'll see where we are on Carling Avenue. We face the old Canadian Tire building, now the Altea Gym. And that site, as I think many of you are probably familiar with, has development approvals for a basically a high-rise campus of development, mixed use, which will be coming online in the coming years. As you're familiar, Carling Avenue is a large right-of-way. It's got a mixture of uses, some kind of residential coming in at various scales, as you could kind of see as it evolves. It's got the 417 highway to the south. And then to the north is where you see some low-rise communities, which we're seeking to accomplish a transition to. Apologies for the grainy photo, but just to show you a little bit of the relationship, our primary frontage is along Carling Avenue, but there's also a piece of Tilbury Avenue, basically this triangular piece here, that allows a frontage onto Tilbury Avenue. That was secured by the landowner, basically to provide other opportunities for both pedestrian and vehicular access and to allow the site to basically benefit from both frontages, which allows for uh, more ample opportunities for porosity. Again, just showing a little bit of the context. So this is what exists on the site right now. You'll see it's a two-story strip mall. Uh, the uses include restaurants, personal service businesses, office space. You'll see to the east, this is the driveway access. The rear of the building is where all the parking is. It's flush with the streetscape. And then there's a recessed strip mall to the west of the property. Again, this is what's happening to the neighbor's site. So they're developing an 18-story building and a 16-story building campus, both with frontage onto Carling Avenue. Uh, just again, flush with the property line here. And then looking west, you'll see some of the other development. This is the aforementioned strip mall I had mentioned, and then beyond, you see some more of the proposed development taking place along Carling. And these are from the other side of the road. You can see the width of the right of way that we're working with here. And here's a shot from Tilbury Avenue. So this is the frontage you might be more familiar with. Right now, you have a neighboring property. You have this fence interface and basically a curb and landscaping. You could see the back of house operations and parking lot of the building and some of the other development taking place. To talk a little bit about policy, the Carling Avenue is an arterial road. It's one of the key people movers in the inner urban area, and also nearby are Churchill, for example, is another collector road. Looking at transit, so when we think about where density goes and when the city and their policy planners think about this, they look to the transportation master plan and what's coming down the pipes for um, uh, future transit initiatives. So if you look all the way to the north, you see what's already operational in terms of well, or what's coming, I guess, at this part of the city in terms of the O train, a little bit of both. Then you have these blue lines that are called transit priority corridors, and they're essentially areas where there's elevated transit activity and measures to help buses move more freely. What's coming in the future is an at-grade rail corridor along Carling Avenue. The city's advanced policy direction to basically build density on this basis, and that's why you're seeing a lot of density come to Carling Avenue all along the right of way. We're located in close proximity to a planned station here where the star and the red bubble are. And of course, here's the official plan, which implements some of that transit master planning direction. So what we're on here is called a Main Street corridor. It's one of the densest designations in the OP, and it encourages an active public realm, a mixture of uses that are pedestrian oriented. It encourages screening of cars and traffic and basically minimizing the role of vehicles on the public realm. Uh, it permits heights of up to 40 stories where a successful transition can be accomplished. The city has various policy mechanisms to describe what a successful transition is. We went through these in our planning rationale, and basically our assessment and working with the architect is 28 stories is about what seems appropriate in terms of accomplishing a transition to the south and also transitioning down from the density approved, excuse me, transitioning downward from the density approved to the south to the more low-rise communities to the north. You'll also see this is called an evolving overlay, and it's what the city uses to say that these areas are expected to see some transition to denser building forms over time. Looking at the zoning, so this is what we're proposing to amend here. So we're subject to two zones. The first is arterial Main Street. This is the zoning they apply basically to sites along these Main Street corridors at this time. And then the back piece, again, because it wasn't originally part of this property, is zoned R4 residential fourth density. The proposal is to consolidate it and treat it as one parcel, which is an effective way that we found to manage the property. And beyond this, we're asking for basically five specialized amendments. The first is building height. So we're asking for a building height of 87 meters, which translates to 28 stories and relates to our transition plan for the site. The second one is a bit of a cleanup. So we owe the city a right-of-way widening. Right now, before the widening is given, we'll fail to have the building close enough to the streetscape. But once we give away that widening, we'll be close enough that this variance or this amendment is no longer needed. It's just cleanup. Next one of possible relevance to discussions is the residential parking rate. We're currently required to be at 0.5 spaces per unit. We're proposing 0.41, so a small reduction in the amount of parking. And one thing that ties into this request is the city asked us, would you consider increasing the required biking space rate to 1 space per unit rather than the current zero point 0.5? And we said, yes, we'll add that to the amendment. If you're going to reduce parking for vehicles, you need to increase it for bicycles. Um, those familiar with the area will know that Carling Avenue is being identified, and you'll see this on our plans for a cycle track. And also there are various pieces of bicycle infrastructure throughout the city, or throughout the area, that is. And the last one, and this will make a bit more sense when Julian presents his plans, but we've protected an area where basically we won't be allowed to put underground parking. And the reason for this is to ensure mature trees can develop on site and grow and that they won't interfere with the parking garage. We'll show you where that is on the site when we get to the site plan. Lastly, I'm almost through these slides. Thanks for your patience here. I just wanted to touch on the draft of the new zoning bylaw briefly. So the new zoning bylaw exercise, it's looking to be finalized by the end of this year or early next year. Uh, we're currently at draft 2, so things are still up in the air to an extent, but the zoning will change for the majority of the site by the city to MS2, that means Main Street Subzone 2. That will permit extensive height that implements the policy to have up to 40 stories. It won't necessarily give or eliminate the need for this variance. We're looking at the site on a very specific level, whereas this paints with a broad brush, but it just serves to indicate where the city's moving in terms of implementing policy. And the other thing is the city's currently proposing, this is city staff that is, the removal of parking minimums. Whether that goes through to council, we don't know yet, but again, we're still looking to institute the requirement through the zoning amendment for 0.41 because that's what seems to be appropriate for the site based on our considerations. And lastly, before I pass it off to the architect, just to give you a picture of what's happened so far and where we are in the process. So we've been working with staff through the pre-application process since about 2023. We've had various configurations for this lot in terms of how we orient parking, how we orient landscaping. There was the introduction of the new piece that we added to Tillbury. And so we've been back and forth for some time with them. We finally became deemed complete on June 18th, so just shy of a month ago. And that brings us to where we are, where two things are happening, the circulation, the formal circulation with staff, and the public notice period, which is where, again, these documents are available to you and we're here to present them to you and receive feedback. Currently, the city has suggested that this could be heard at the September 5th, 2025 Planning and Housing Committee, which, as you likely know, is also a public forum where you can present a delegation to the committee and staff should you wish to. And in the future, for this to actually be constructed, there's more process, which is a site plan control application. If the zoning comes into place, we will need to make a second submission to basically resolve all the detailed elements of the site, things like parking stall configurations and aisle widths and some of the more nitty-gritty elements of site planning. So that's the planning background. And I will pass it now to Julian, who will get into some of the design, and then I think it will be time for a little bit of a Q&A. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Scott, for that. I think that was a really good overview of the planning side of things. So I'll go into a bit more detail now. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julian from Project One Studio. I'm project architect, and we're going to talk about this 28-story mixed-use building over an activated green ground plane. I'll skip over a little bit of the context because Scott did a really good job of talking about that. But as you discussed, there's some ongoing developments in the proximity of our site. This is the location of that new proposed future rapid transit station. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to knit this new height into this arterial corridor that's already growing and kind of transition to this more low density neighborhood to the north. I also want to point out this historic quarry that's not far off from our site. It's going to come in later. I'll talk about this in a second. So how do we transition effectively to the north? So what we tried to do is place the building on the southwest corner of the property. And what this allows us to do is put all of the building height on the south side, so it has the least impact on properties to the north. It also gives us a little bit of buffer between our proposal and the existing proposal on the east side, which is right along the property line. It also gives us some space to step down and transition in height up to the north. The dual access is really important for the project in order to kind of have some direct access to the commerce on the ground floor. And we've worked with the city a lot to develop this ground plane to allow opportunities for planting. So this is the landscape plan just quickly. Originally, we had the parking ramp in this corner of the site, but we decided to sacrifice a unit in order to tuck that into the building and allow for a lot more planting opportunities on the ground plane. So we were really drawn to this historic Fraser Dunn style quarry. It used to be used for gravel in the early 1900s. Now it's being used to store huge mountains of snow, as I'm sure you guys have realized. But it does have this ability to be visually striking and give a sense of place to the area. It's pretty iconic when you're driving down the 417, even if you don't know the area super well. And the neighboring Carlington Park also has a pretty wide draw, even in the winter. So we wanted to use this as a jumping point for the design and create some sort of connection with the geology of the area. So we developed the podium levels with a sort of weaving and articulated pattern of masonry brick, inspired by the striations of the rock in the quarry. And we wanted this expression to also translate to the upper levels of the building. So we've worked on these linear balconies that go up the tower. This is an architectural feature that we see in a lot of older buildings in Ottawa, and it kind of highlights the stratified quality of the quarry while providing passive ways to limit sun exposure on the southern face of the building. Our tower floor plate respects the 750 meters square that the city requires and does have the appropriate setbacks from the property lines. So there's a couple of ways that we're trying to help transition this height into the neighboring neighborhood. Aligning the podium along with the other podiums on Carling is the first measure that we're using. We're also trying to open up the ground plane by raising up the floor level of the ground floor, and also having some units that are residential that face Tillbury was a strategy that we're using to accomplish that. The last thing is stepping down this building a couple of times to help transition the height of the building has been really important for the project. So this is a view from Tillbury Avenue looking southwest. I just want to close by saying that we're happy to offer almost 350 new homes with this development, with a good mix of units that range from studios to larger family units. And we've done a lot of work with the city to develop this ground plane into something that can offer active retail spaces, pedestrian links to the site, and we made a real effort to provide ample planting opportunities and soft landscaping at grade. So I wanted to keep it short, but I want to thank everyone for your time. We're here to listen, and your feedback is crucial as we help shape our next submission as the project moves forward.
Okay. Thank you, Scott and Julian, for your presentation. With that, I think we'll go to the Q&A, and how this will work, I'll read out the questions, and Scott, I'm imagining Scott, Julian, and I think John is your transportation consultant. I'm guessing a lot of questions will be directed to you folks, but we'll figure
Yep,
it out depending on the content of the question.
no problem.
First question, what is the planned start and end date of construction?
So just I'll say something on process here, and then I believe Inside Edge can provide a little bit more elaboration. But I'll
Sure.
say that generally speaking, there's a lot that needs to take place before construction can happen on the site. So including say we're on track with the city and the zoning goes through in September. There's still a full site plan control review, which can take in our experience, up to 8 to 12 um, months, depending on the level of complexity. Because we've done a lot of review on this site already, as we've kind of prepared these documents, there might be some efficiencies there. But as for a physical build date, I don't think the developer has confirmed that in terms of their internal targets, but I'll turn it to them briefly so they can say their piece.
Thank you for that, Scott. So we actually don't have a set date in mind, and as to Scott's just alluded to, it's quite a lengthy process, and that being said, it's not this isn't something that we're immediately acting on. We're just following and going through the steps. And as you saw, it was mentioned before, we've started this process in 2023. We're now 2025. We still have about a year and so left. So I think it's really safe to say that this is nothing that is happening immediately. But it's we're getting the process started, but we have no set date at this time that we can share.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question. It's a two-parter. It's lengthy. So it starts, I have a two-part question and a comment. Why is this building getting a throughway onto Tilbury when the new buildings on Carling just to the west of Cole didn't get one and had been truncated at Cole to prevent a vehicular throughfare? Number two, what street calming will be done on Melbourne, given that traffic is already significantly increased, will increase drastically more given the Tillbury connection, and with the understanding the city has already committed to not add sidewalks or street calming to the southernmost block of Melbourne, despite adding them to the rest of Melbourne north of Greenwood. And then there's a comment which I'll read, and then we can address the questions. The comment is, I do not think it's appropriate to connect to Tilbury Avenue, will vehemently oppose it. Tilbury is simply not built for this sort of volume as it's already crumbling. There's zero chance it can handle this development. I'm all for this development, but providing access is an absolute failure on multiple levels.
Thanks for that question, Jesse. As you can imagine, I'll lean on our transportation expert for this. Yeah, if you want to go ahead, John.
Sure. So I think there are a couple different elements to the question. One of them, why is it being allowed? Or why is it being proposed, I guess is probably the more accurate way to say it here. And this was something that was discussed a lot with city staff. There was a lot of back and forth. There were a lot of design iterations. There was a lot of discussion. And what we ended up with actually is a driveway that has a lot of subtle elements that will discourage the use as a cut through route. So you'll notice that the angle of the driveway is sloping sort of away from the building and away from the Tilbury access route. And there's an adjacent building quite close to it. And so there's not actually a good visible line of sight between the two buildings to see that that is a viable route for people who are not familiar with the area. Obviously, people who are familiar with the area will be aware of it. But there are some design elements on the site as well, including multiple 90-degree turns, a sort of slow design, pedestrian interactions, parking on the site as well, that are going to discourage it from being an obvious route. It's fairly narrow as well. I would think that if once you end up on this section of Carling Avenue, you've already passed Churchill, which would provide you access to Tilbury. And that's assuming you're traveling westbound, given only westbound drivers can get in. So we do not anticipate that the cut through demands will be very high on this site. especially given those elements, and the network layout. So it's certainly some feedback that we'll take back. It is something that has been considered a lot to date through this process and with city staff. But certainly we will take that feedback. In terms of street calming on Melbourne, given that traffic has already significantly increased, will increase dramatically, given more. So that is something that you can, I suppose, solicit the city to review and examine through, I guess, through the councillor's office as one avenue there. The use of Tilbury, it is a fairly heavily used route already, as you do suggest. The increase in traffic from this site specifically would not be anticipated to be not commensurate with the, or sorry, not a large impact relative to the amount of traffic that's already on it. A lot of the inbound traffic to this site will be coming off of Carling, and then it's primarily outbound traffic that will be using Tilbury, as well as inbound traffic from the west. We would be anticipating something like, well, based on our traffic forecasts, which the city reviews and provides rates for us to apply and to study. We would be anticipating something on the order of one car every 2 minutes during the peak hours. So in the heaviest hour of the day, one vehicle on Tilbury going in any direction, every 2 minutes would be about the traffic that we are forecasting from this site. So in terms of mitigations for the public road network that is already existing, um, it's not necessarily something we would look at doing for that level of traffic. The city has a framework for determining when traffic calming measures should and should not be applied. In this case, it did not trigger those requirements, and so that is how we've arrived at where we are today. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add on that, but that's
Can I just ask, is there a community benefits charge that would be associated with this upon pulling your permits?
Based on my assessment, there would be, Councillor.
Okay.
I'll verify that while we're discussing, but based on my understanding of the site, that would be standard here.
Okay. My normal practice is to apply some portion of those CBCs to traffic calming in the immediate adjacent area. We have actually a fairly generous traffic calming budget now, and we spend a fair bit of money each year adding new traffic calming measures. But if I can use some of the CBC money that comes out of this one, sorry, and forgive my the fact that I'm on my deck, folks. It's cooler out here than it is in my house. I'd be interested in using CBC to implement traffic calming measures through here. Although the timing is such that may be the next councillor's job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Councillor, while I'm reviewing this, the bylaw does require it for any building or structure of 5 or more stories and 10 or more residential units. So you're in business on CBC.
Perfect. Thank you.
Which is, for those who are unfamiliar with that requirement, it's a 4% of land value contribution.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Okay, here we go. Contrary to what this proposal just suggested, there are no prospects for light rail along Carling Avenue in even the medium term. The city has struggled to fund and build even the LRTs in the current pipeline. Why is the city approving developments like this that require mass transit access when there is, in fact, a shortage of public transit access at this site? Recent OC Transpo changes cut one route, the number 50, and significantly decreased the effectiveness of the only other route that services this location, the now infrequent and unreliable number 85, which no longer gives riders access to downtown without multiple transfers.
I can probably feel that one again. So yeah, definitely development, given transit orientation is a bit of a chicken and egg dilemma, right, where you have to have the sufficient density to support the transit investments, and then the transit investments support the increase in density, right? So that's always an issue in the city, and a difficulty, I would say, for the established neighborhoods in which some of these developments are being developed into. I will say you're correct in that that the LRT is not funded. It's not within. Actually, I have to. I can review the current TMP.
Yeah, I think it's important to note the notion of a tram that was in the previous version of the TMP is gone from the current draft of the TMP that we will almost certainly pass on Wednesday. And so Carling has now been, I think very appropriately, been downgraded to bus rapid transit with an interim condition of dedicated bus lanes. I'm encouraged by that because the tram was always a pipe dream. Um, Putting in certainly interim dedicated bus lanes, eventually followed by full BRT, is achievable. Um, so, the key to getting those upgrades in transit capacity on these big arterials, though, is density. John is absolutely right to say that it is chicken and egg. In a location like this, greater density will drive greater transit service, and we're not looking at whether any given bus serves that today. Transit is an operational matter that can be fairly quickly changed every 3 months. They can add service, they can change frequency of service, etc. So in the long term, Carling Avenue will be a more transit intensive street. And it is the kind of location where the city is looking to put these denser, taller towers.
And I will add on to that. Thank you, Councillor. I will add on to that that there is a plan for implementation of bus transit lanes, dedicated transit lanes along Carling, between Lincoln Field Station and Bronson. That is, my understanding of it is that it's the design has progressed to a certain state, and then it's currently just on hold pending a road safety review. I don't know, Counselor, if you have any more up-to-date information on that.
Yeah, I think we're still 2 or 3 years away. But my strong suspicion is that this building wouldn't be built until past that date anyways. So, but the transit improvements on Carling are coming, and the fact that the TMP has made those more realistic, I'm encouraged that they will actually come as opposed to the previous TMP, which had a tram.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to move on to the next question. What will happen to all the businesses spanning the property? Will some be relocating during construction and then returning to a new building?
Yeah, so we're always open and happy to work with our tenants that like we've been in Ottawa for quite some time. We're happy to work with the tenants that we have at our existing facility, but the truth to the matter is this development will not take place for a very long time. So there's a lot of planning that will be had from now until when a shovel was in the ground. But that being said, it's quite a ways out, and we're happy to work with our existing tenants in the portfolio.
Thank you. All right. Okay, next we have a parking question. This proposal would allow less than one parking spot per unit. How will the city avoid neighboring streets from becoming essentially the de facto surface parking for these units? Already, during construction for the other nearby towers, our street has become the parking lot for trades workers because there is no other place to park on Carling.
I can probably address that one. So we are eliminating parking minimums in Ottawa. Or sorry, I shouldn't say we are. We are strongly leaning that way in our current draft of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and I suspect that that will pass. We are probably going to carve out the rural areas. Some people will move into this building who have cars. who don't have a parking spot. And right now what the developers are finding is, they're responding to what the market is demanding with these lower parking minimums, because there are lots of apartment buildings right across our ward that have unused parking capacity. It's just too expensive for people to park in these buildings. Some people, though, will move in with their cars, and they're going to find it exceedingly difficult to try to live here if they have a car and they don't have a parking spot in the building. The wintertime snow bans, the time limits that are on the streets. We can take a look at the parking time limits to ensure that they doesn't encourage longer term parking. And frankly, you folks on the call who live in the immediately adjacent neighborhood will probably be very similar to folks who live in similar buildings that have very low parking ratios elsewhere in the ward and elsewhere in the city. You're going to call bylaw when you see people parked over time. I know in my office, we get calls from people who have made poor choices with respect to deciding, even though they don't have a parking spot, they'll rely on street parking. They're hassled by bylaw. It becomes very expensive in terms of tickets that they get, and they move. There are lots of options if you have a car for apartments to live in. Eventually, the market will ensure that people with cars choose the appropriate accommodation. It is very difficult when those folks call my office saying, I'm getting hassled by bylaw. I don't have a parking spot at the building. Please help me. We tell them we don't have any help to offer. There's a transition for sure. Some people will try to move in with a car, and they're going to find it exceedingly difficult to do so. Contractors are a different thing. Contractors need to be on the site. They need to park in close proximity, but the actual residential parking, I'm very comfortable with a 0.4 ratio.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question for the development team. It reads, I appreciate the opportunity to hear from the development team, but it seems very late in the design/development process. What specific steps has the developer taken to engage with the community prior to this call, especially those living in the neighborhood to the north of the proposed building? Is the developer prepared to engage more directly? And if so, how?
Yeah, so I mean, with the team, we've engaged Foten, who is often going through this on a regular basis. They understand what takes place in the community. We're open to hearing feedback. We're open to listening to it and seeing how there's a way that we can that we can make sure everyone is heard. So we're happy to sit on calls like this, and this is this is something that we've done preemptively in a way, is to sit here and take this call and take your feedback and see how we might be able to adapt it into our plans in the future. But to date, we've been following what the city has recommended that we change. We've been following the steps that the city and steps and procedures the city has put in place. And I feel like that is a way in which how we've been able to engage in kind of community efforts per se.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just add to that, Jordan, as I touched on in my presentation, the cities revised their review framework in response to some of the provincial initiatives that have taken place. And part of that is having a lot of the review period take place before the application is deemed complete. As you're aware, we've been deemed complete for less than a month. And the nature of that was our applicant, in the view of the city, was inadequate, is the term they use, and they wanted to see some things resolved. For example, they had some discomfort with the Carling Avenue access, and we needed to demonstrate to them why we needed to maintain that access in its existing format in order to lessen the impact to Tillbury. So although prior to that we hadn't been able to, come with a fully baked plan, as Jordan had said, we're very easily reachable, and we'd like to engage the community as we lead up to a planning and housing committee date, and see if we can win any extra improvements to the plan. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott and Jordan. I'm going to move to the next question. It's construction related. Once construction begins, how long will it last, and will there be blasting? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can answer this one. So the bedrock's at about 5 to 9 feet underground. We're proposing 2 levels of parking, so there will be some blasting on site in order to excavate. And construction, it can vary, but we're going to look at probably about a 2-year construction schedule.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have a question from the Westboro Community Association. Is this building set back the same distance from the Carling Avenue property line as the buildings now under construction to the east?
It's actually, oh,
Yeah, go ahead,
Julian.
Scott. Go ahead.
Pardon?
Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you. I'll let you get into the technical details, but in short, it's actually set back farther. So a bit of history. We're not sure exactly how it was accomplished, but the building to the east has a um, partially sits in what should be the widening. So we had pointed that out during our review period of, are we able to use this line basically to continue the streetscape? And they said, no, you need to contribute to the accomplishment of conveying the entire widening as requested. So we said, okay. So that's why you'll see ours is recessed. Ours is actually meeting the full widening, and that's why. And you'll see in the frontage, this allows for the cycle track to continue and allows for a more generous streetscape. Julian, let me know if I missed anything.
It's all good.
Okay, I'm going to I'll read the next comment, but I feel like it was answered previously. It's about Carling and the transit priority. It reads, the at-grade LRT going along Carling that you mentioned has been removed from the next transportation master plan. I am unclear how it can be used to justify this rezoning. So next, I'm going to move on to the next question, and it's about Tillbury. It reads, what measures will be taken to avoid Tillbury via the building access to both streets from becoming not a residential street, but a busy east-west thoroughfare? This is a street full of young families, and already we've had issues with vehicles in a hurry having close calls with their children, including at nearby child care centers.
Yeah, I can take that one. So yeah, again, I think from this development specifically, um, which is the subject of tonight's open house, obviously, we are forecasting on the order of one vehicle along Tilbury every 2 minutes. Obviously, there is more development within the area, and that is a risk, generally speaking, for Tilbury, that there is increased use. A lot of those developments do interface with Carling more directly, however. So the overall impact from this specific development is not considered that high. But it's something that, again, you can monitor, reach out to your counselor, whether that's Counselor Leeper or the next counselor, to discuss that traffic calming budget. There are measures that can be taken with those funds, to mitigate any of these concerns that you might be experiencing.
Folks, I think, and and I'm sorry, I'm really getting up to speed with this development in depth this evening. But by having an entry egress on Tilbury, I'm thinking about significant draws. Like during the summer, there's probably 1,500 kids a day going to Dovercourt. Many of them may be in cars that are traveling west on Carling. And this looks like a really interesting way to cut through without having to deal with Churchill and the turn off of Churchill to Dovercourt. This looks like a quick way to get to Melbourne or Roosevelt in order to finish a north-south trip. And I think residents are legitimately asking how we can prevent that cut through. And when Churchill is backed up, um, even just getting to Richmond Road. So if I know about this little deek, I can get into the interior neighborhood onto much less congested streets fairly quickly.
So that would be, avoiding Churchill, also avoiding Cole Avenue, I suppose, Counselor. Is that what you're
Probably. Let me just pull that up. To get off of Carling that much more quickly.
It is 100 meters down the road at 60, 70 kilometers per hour. Um, and this is a narrow drive aisle that has multiple 90-degree turns, has pedestrian facilities crossing it, has parking on the lot, has access to the underground garage. Um, I wouldn't personally see that um, as like a huge desire line for a cut through, based on my read of the situation. But it is certainly something that we can study further and discuss among the team and think about for sure and take back as feedback.
Okay, and I know I want to chat further about with staff about their thinking on pressing for the two entry. Are they insistent on the Carling entry egress, or is that the developer, Brian?
Actually, the
Yeah,
contract.
Counselor, I was gonna speak to that, and Scott and John, please correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but we've had a lot of discussion about that, and I think they were most strongly interested, let's say, in having the rear access connection.
Okay.
Our concern was to actually have the Carling connection because if in our experience, if you're going to have viable retail on a site like this, it's really hard if you're having to wander through the community to go, pick up whatever you're heading to the site for. So we were more interested in that, and they were more interested in the rear. So
Okay.
obviously we should engage with them again and see, if there's any flexibility, if they're mitigating approaches that can help address the concerns that people are sharing. But I think that's the history thus far.
Okay.
And to fill in a few more of those details, it is also a set of conflicting virtues, right? So um, typically within the transportation discipline, you try to avoid access directly onto the arterial and provide it to the
Yep.
road in the rear as a practice, reducing access onto cycling routes, and there's going to be bus priority lanes there. So it's so we're being pushed and pulled in a lot of different directions for sure, and yeah, I don't think we'll ever necessarily come up with one solution that will satisfy everyone. But we can certainly take that on board again, as Brian says, and
Okay.
review.
I want to look at that more in depth over the next couple of weeks. Your trip generation, I have no doubt that your number is right. This building is not going to be a significant source of trip generation, but I think the cut through concern that residents have is worth exploring further. How wide? I'm sorry, the site plan isn't up yet. How wide is that drive aisle? 6 meters?
6 meters.
Okay, so it's
It's
if you
worth
know it's
mentioning.
there,
Yeah, it's worth mentioning this is a write-in only as well.
of
So we're going
course.
to
Yeah.
have measures in place that people can't cut through north to south.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack it with that discussion. I'll give it back to Alice, but this is something I do want to explore a little further with our staff and see what they're thinking.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, next question. It's a comment, and I'll read it out. The proposal seems to ignore the impact that the height of the proposed building will have on the neighborhood to the north. Recent new buildings to the west of the proposed building have already negatively impacted those of us living in this neighborhood in terms of both visual and noise impact. I don't know if anyone wants to address that, or we'll note it as a comment.
Sure. I mean, we appreciate the note, and again, we were very thoughtful in terms of how to accomplish a transition, both in terms of applying the city's recommendation to acknowledge an angular plane, which we sit in, and then also uh, using a narrow tower floor plate and step backs down to the streetscape to help facilitate that balance of density, including the benefit from the kind of a regular jog that Tillbury does in front of the site allows for a greater opportunity of landscaping where there isn't really buildable area otherwise, and allows for additional separation across that right of way. So with consideration to what's proposed by the city in terms of policy and in terms of accomplishing a transition, we believe we fit in with what's seen on adjacent sites. So maybe I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is about infrastructure. It reads, I would like to know whether infrastructure of Westboro, like kindergartens, schools, clinics, etc., would be able to support the ever-growing population. Plenty of new high-rise story buildings will bring thousands of new residents were already constructed on the street just in few recent years.
So appreciate that comment. Thank you. One of those parts of this whole circulation process that I had mentioned we're now undertaking is circulation with the school boards, and so we'll get some insight on that from their behalf. Otherwise, part of the inclusion of personal services and things like that is the maintenance of retail units at grade so that we can continue to have that be a function of the site as it densifies. And then more broadly, the policy direction from the city is to target growth along these corridors in addition to areas in hubs. And so the modeling done by the staff at the City of Ottawa has accounted on a high level for levels of intensification, including this and other properties.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Okay, the next question relates again to the discussion around and the questions around the LRT and transit corridor, and I feel like that's been covered, so I'm just going to jump ahead to the next question, which reads, how will the proposed development proactively address accessibility considerations and ensure that barriers will be prevented?
I can answer this one. 15% of the units will be barrier-free as per the Ontario Building Code. So that means larger corridors, larger doors to bedrooms, stuff like that. And 100% of the building will be serviced by elevators and be barrier-free and at least visitable for all the units. So someone in a wheelchair can get into all the units and use the bathroom there.
All right, thanks. Okay, the next question relates to traffic and transportation. It reads, the transportation plan includes traffic counts that predate the construction of the two large tower developments that have now been erected nearby and don't appear to foresee the additional traffic once the former Canadian Tire site also includes multiple towers. Why does the city approve new developments based on outdated traffic data? Would this not significantly alter some of the assumptions in this proposal?
You can take that. So yeah, the process that the city follows for transportation impact assessments, which is the study that we prepared for to support this development application, requires that you take existing traffic data and then you study that, and that's a snapshot in time, obviously, as you rightly point out. What you then have to do is take any approved development in the area or even development under consideration in almost every case that I've ever worked on and add that to the network. So add the forecasted traffic to the network before you then study what the impacts of your specific development are. So in the case of this study, we did take the nearby towers, add their background traffic onto the network, and then use that as a baseline for us to then justify the increase in traffic and rationalize the increase in traffic from this specific development. So it always builds on the last study. And every next study, it's incumbent upon that study to justify the increase from its own traffic, given all of everything that's been approved or considered before. So while it's not in the existing counts, it is in the future counts that we're forecasting. And then once those towers, should they go for development application next to the old Canadian Tire, which I worked at, by the way, once those come online, then what happens is they will produce a study that will take into account more up-to-date traffic counts that will maybe even include some of these developments, which we then get to check our assumptions, check our forecasts, and make sure everything is developing to the expectation, and then maybe mitigate it based on that. So it does self-correct It's all built into the process, and over time, everything gets more and more accurate once things get built out and remeasured.
John, if I may, I just uh, sometimes residents will get sort of very in the weeds of the TIAs. And in a context like this, I'm just not sure that it's a productive or helpful direction in which to go. Um, our official plan, passed by council and approved by the minister, says that we are going to have areas like this be our tallest, densest areas, our arterial roads. The official plan has like a number of areas along the arterial roads that are like this, and we are assuming a future over the course of the next 25 years of tall, dense development in locations like this. Once we've passed that official plan, we do a transportation master plan in which they take a look at the forecasted travel demand. In a context like this one, we can't widen the road to create more capacity. There are going to be a lot more cars, and Carling Avenue is going to become more congested, and the local streets are going to become more congested. So we have to spend money, the developer's money through development charges, on mitigations to that congestion to ensure that people are still able to move through. City Council knows that congestion is coming to areas like this, and our answer in our transportation master plan is hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in things like transit. We can't build new roads in this area, but there isn't some threshold at which the city is going to refuse permission for zoning permission for a building that exactly meets what our official plan is considering for the zoning, right? The city does know that these are going to become tall, densely populated corridors. We forecast that, and then we put in place a very expensive capital program to try to mitigate that congestion by giving people other ways to move around. In the suburbs, when you build a greenfield, it may create such pressure on an intersection that that intersection needs to be widened or reconfigured. The arterial road may need to be widened, and the developers will be responsible for contributing towards that. But in a downtown urban context like this, that's not an option that's available to us. But that doesn't mean that we don't want tall, dense development along these corridors. Our answer to the tall, dense development is going to be to build rapid transit along Carling. And that will take place not quite in lockstep, but almost dovetail with the increase in density along Carling. I just want to caution people against getting into how many more hundreds of cars per hour along Carling do you think there are than when the traffic study was done? Because ultimately, that is not going to play into council's decision or city planner's decision as to whether or not to recommend this building to go in, when we have already said in our official plan, we want to see tall, dense developments along arterial roads like this.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm gonna move on to another question. The next question is similar to what was just discussed. So I'm gonna go down to a question about sizes of the units and some other things, such as what size is a family unit? Are you proposing 3 bedrooms? Where will the garbage be picked up? Will there be any options for below market price housing? Will there be any accessible housing? The transition to low rises on Tillbury will be very tricky. Will balconies, etc., infringe on neighbors? And how will you avoid noise from mechanicals disturbing neighbors? Thanks. So there are a lot of questions in there. It's probably, I think, Julian, do you want to try and address some of those?
Yeah, I can take a crack at a few of those. So what size is the family unit? The city defines a large dwelling unit as 80 meters square or larger in size. And there's a policy in place that we need to provide 5% large dwelling units. And we're going to be providing about 20%. So they're not 3 bedrooms per se. A lot of them are 2+ dens, but they're larger units that are meant to be for families. Where will the garbage be picked up? This is the sort of loading area of the property. So we've got some residential garbage rooms and commercial garbage rooms and loading move-in rooms all along this side of the development. Will there be options for below market price housing? That's going to be a question for the developer. there are some funding opportunities available if we do provide affordable housing, but I think that'll be something we'll be looking at a little bit further down the road. Will there be any accessible housing? Yes, all the units will be accessible, or at least visitable, and 15% of the units will be accessible. The centers that will rise on Tillbury is very tricky with balconies and verging on neighbors. So a lot of the balconies are, let's see, pull that picture, are recessed balconies, which help with overlook and privacy. And how will you avoid noise and mechanicals during disturbing neighbors? So all the mechanical systems will be happening on the penthouse level of the building, and they'll be enclosed. So acoustics shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Next, Julian, I think we have another question for you. It reads, in terms of environmental sustainability, are there plans to make this building LEED compliant?
I'm not sure that LEED certification is going to be pursued, but there are a number of funding opportunities as well for providing environmental performance of the building, energy performance of the building. So that's surely something that the development team will be looking at.
Okay. Okay. Next, can the development team please provide information about how to contact them?
So Alice, I don't know if it's easiest if you provide my email through your channels or something like
Sure.
that, or I could type it in the chat. I'm not sure what's easiest, but I'm happy to take emails from folks here. And again, as you're probably well looped in, you could also reach out to the staff planner assigned to the file, which we could provide contact for. But if you want to, cut to me directly, it may be a bit quicker. So I'm happy to share my email.
Yeah, Scott, do you want to type it in the chat? And then
Yep.
also if anyone misses it or for whatever reason, please feel free to reach out to our office and I can pass that along. And also just a reminder, if folks go on to the city's Dev app page, you can see the name of the city planner and you can also, there's a button where you can provide feedback there. Okay.
So sorry to interrupt you, Alice.
Yeah,
It seems like I
sorry.
could only message the host and the panelist. I don't know
Oh,
if maybe I could write it in a question. I'm not sure how this thing works.
okay, here I'll just change that feature. Okay, you should be able to do that now. Yeah. Do you want to type it in again? I just switched it
Yep.
so everyone can see it.
No problem.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to read another question. It reads, why is there not a prominent entrance for residents on Carling? The streetscape of the new building is dominated by retail and a better entrance would help to break that up.
Yeah, so we did want the residents to have some sort of identity on the street. So we're proposing an amenity room right on Carling, that's fronting Carling. And this would be most likely a shared workspace. So there'd be a bit of a kind of an office setting with tied into the main entry. But giving prominence to this main entry is something we can definitely look at as the project moves forward.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And I want to note there's a request for the developer to please make the documents presented this evening in accessible format. Scott, can you take a note of that? And
Yeah. In fact, maybe a follow-up question. I'm hoping to understand whether by accessible format you mean PDFs that you can download and share, or do you mean accessible in terms of visually contrasted things like that? Either way, we can accommodate. I just want to help out here, but certainly anything we've shared today can be passed on to the group here.
great. And to the person that wrote it, yeah, you can email Ellen about that or feel free to reach out to our office and we can make the connection.
Great.
Okay. Okay, here's a question about bedrock blasting. This will be the third round of bedrock blasting in the space of just over 1 block along Carling. Has the impact of all this digging and destabilization been studied as far as it might impact the foundations of nearby homes?
Yeah, so when the building goes into construction, the excavating contractor will have engineers who will analyze the site, look at what the options are for excavation and ensure that all the excavation activities won't affect neighboring properties.
Okay. Here's a question about parking spaces. Of the proposed 154 parking spaces, what percentage will have electric vehicle chargers, or will they all have that capability?
So I can answer this one as well. Interesting question. It really varies by developer to developer and project to project. There's systems in place where you can install basically a charger on every spot, and it kind of shares the electrical load amongst all the spots. Other developers prefer to have only a few spots with chargers. So that's a conversation we haven't had yet with the developer, but it's something we'll definitely look at as the project moves forward. Starting to say that a lot.
Okay. Okay, here's a question about HVAC. Will the HVAC equipment be shielded properly from the neighborhood to avoid the constant noise and hum we can hear from similar developments like the Talisman or the Clemau?
Yeah, for sure. The plan is to have all this equipment shielded inside the building. And there are city requirements for noise disturbance that we'll be respecting as well.
Yeah, and just to add on that, if I may, when we submit our site plan application, we'll be required to do a stationary noise study, and that will give us, or will basically give the city a chance to review exactly what we're proposing in terms of noise. Yeah.
Okay. Here's a question about cycling infrastructure. It reads, can you speak to the cycling infrastructure currently in the area and what's planned and the timelines for the latter?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the adjacent building is providing a cycle track along its frontage. Does anyone have that boundary condition in their mind?
Yeah, it's on the site plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this site will be continuing it across its frontage. This site is providing a more generous frontage condition given the requirement for dedicating that additional right-of-way to Carling Avenue. The other aspect of cycling along the site and in the area will be that it's the expectation that as the transit priority lanes get built out, those will be buses and bicycles accepted, right? So that it's that kind of facility. Along the frontage of this site and the adjacent one, there will be a cycle track, but then that can continue on to the future bus/bike lane or bus lane that supports cyclists.
Yeah, and to add on that, maybe just when the reason the cycling lane truncates at the end of our property is simply because the property to the west encroaches basically past our frontage, and also it would be at the time of either redevelopment of the site that they would then be compelled to continue that cycle track, or as an alternative, the city may choose as part of a right-of-way improvement plan to expropriate some lands and continue it on their own behalf. But that's the future intent would be for that to continue to extend.
Okay, next, more of a comment, again, traffic related. During rush hour, people already use the parking lot to the west of this site to get from Carling to Cole. I imagine the same will happen to your property during rush hour. Okay, I'm gonna go on to another question. I understand that it's the official plan that pushes development to arterials, but particularly wide arterials like Carling bring lots of emissions, which obviously pose a health risk. Can anything be done to mitigate the health impact on people who live here? I don't know if anyone knows
Yeah,
the answer to that, but
it's a big subject of study, transportation health and mitigating the impacts of particulate matter and that kind of thing on our breathable air within urban areas, especially with this kind of arterial. I don't think that this development specifically will be contributing materially to that issue, but it is an issue for sure along any such arterial. That they're studying a lot more currently that we have yet to really see the fruits of that nascent field.
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I'll add that as far as noise pollution is concerned, because we are on an arterial road, we prepared and submitted as part of this rezoning a transportation noise and vibration study, which essentially assesses what the impact would be measured in things like decibels to tenants in this building and what measures are necessary as part of construction to ensure that it doesn't become a nuisance or a quality of life impact. So that's been contemplated. In our experience with the development review process to date, the city hasn't implemented any kind of study requirements relating to other forms of pollution on the level you're suggesting, but we appreciate the comment.
William, I just want to say I think one of the most important things to reducing, the particulates in particular, is continued electrification of our transit and pushing people more and more to transit. That means we have to improve our transit service, but it also means we have to have density along transit in order to support it. And this is having buildings like these in these kinds of locations is supportive of the overall health goals of our official plan.
Mhm. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, I'm just going to read a comment. Heather's noted what Jeff said, cut through is likely to be an issue. Heather's also asked, why can't you build 3 bedrooms? But I thought, did I hear earlier there would be some 3 bedrooms?
There are no 3-bedroom units planned at the moment,
Okay,
but the unit mix is something that we've developed in response to market research and market needs. Um, yeah, no 3 bedrooms at this time.
okay. Okay, next, can you speak to pedestrian safety around that back driveway? I don't see any pedestrian space such as sidewalks there.
So, if you don't mind zooming in, Julian, we are providing a sidewalk along the frontage. As you're probably well aware, there's currently no sidewalks along this side of Tilbury, but the city has asked that we provide a sidewalk along our frontage, which we've certainly complied with. The extension of the sidewalk would take place subject to future redevelopment of adjacent properties, but another part of that, and I mean, John may have more insight on this than I do, but the throat length of the actual aisle provides an opportunity for sight lines to see pedestrians passing by on the street edge. And again, when you look at how the building is set back relative to where the sidewalk and where the Tilbury Avenue is, there's it's not a sight triangle as the traditional phrase would imply, but it allows for sight lines to take place as well.
Thank you. Okay, here's a question about car sharing. Car sharing is a great way to reduce car dependency and car ownership. Will some of the stalls be used for car share?
Yeah, this
Uh,
is definitely something we can look at. Yeah.
Okay.
no, you got it, Julian. All good. Yeah, it's a again, it's a site plan question, and as you might be aware, the draft zoning bylaw is proposing a requirement to be EV ready for parking spaces. So it's certainly at the top of staff's mind and perhaps council's mind. So more to come on that. At the zoning level, it's not something the city looks to have locked in currently. So at this point, we don't have more on that.
Okay, I'm just scrolling through the rest of the comments. Some of the, like I've noted, I realize there's some additional comments and questions around traffic, and transportation. But I do feel like we've covered a lot of that tonight already. And also I'd encourage people to submit those comments to the planner through DevApps as well, and back to the development team through Alain here online tonight. Let me just see. Alain, I just want to point out there's been some clarity around what type of accessibility someone's looking for. They note in terms of the documents, accessibility for persons who face visual barriers, who, for example, need to magnify documents or use a screen reader. So I just wanted to note that.
Great, that's helpful. I know that, for example, these site plans, as you can see, you can zoom in closely and it doesn't distort the image. It remains clear. So hopefully that gives you that opportunity. And I'll make sure that at least my slides they're annotated so they have alt text, for example, to ensure that there's a little bit of visual support there. But thanks for the request. It might take a day or two to get that sorted out, but we'll do our best.
Okay. All right. And I just want to know, sorry, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you? Okay.
I had a question, Alice.
Yeah.
So are you guys proposing to convey land for parkland, or is this a cash and lieu situation?
It's a cash and lose situation. What we understand from the city is there's not enough area to convey for them to get a viable and let's say desirable kind of rectangle of parkland. So what we've negotiated with the city is that they would accept cash and lieu. And then, yeah, we've established this amenity area just to provide some green space on the site and provide some opportunities for mature tree planting to take place to contribute to that canopy.
Okay. And I just want to know, I know we just talked about the fact there are no 3 bedrooms, but Heather has added that she says, sorry, so the reason there are no 3 bedrooms is because there's no market for them. So she's,
Yeah.
So
maybe just to touch on that quickly again, thanks Heather for your comment. So a couple things on that. So the city's OP has a requirement that the zoning implement a 5% minimum of large bedroom units, or sorry, large household units. A large household unit, as Julian had said, is 80 meters squared. So we provide some two bedrooms in here to meet that threshold and, give us, they call it an equivalent area. That being said, not to get into any of the market background, and certainly this is not something that FOTEN does in-house, but the experience tends to be that folks who seek in Ottawa a 3 bedroom will seek something ground oriented. Although in places like Toronto and places that are a little more dense and more costly to live, you do see some 3 bedrooms in high rises being a viable format. But the experience with the market is just there's enough housing stock that provides a ground oriented 3 bedroom unit that it becomes more compelling than a high rise for things like families who are looking for that extra space. So that's where that experience comes from. But like we said, there's still opportunities. The zoning won't lock in a unit count, so we could explore this further if things change. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll cover 2 more questions. Next, we have the renderings show the upper portion of the building as being quite dark, but this will increase heat and produce the heat island effect. Would you consider a lighter color?
So we looked at a number of cladding options, and we landed on this kind of dark material. There's a number of dark projects in the city, and we are cognizant of this heat island effect, but these linear balconies on the south side of the building really do help to break up that the effect of the sun on the building. And that's one of the reasons we kind of went into this direction.
Okay. And lastly, will the amenity space around the building be available to the public? Is it too early to ask about benches and other placemaking and accessibility features that will serve the community?
So, and maybe there's an opportunity for Inside Edge to comment on this, but certainly it's not lost on us that in extension to being aware of the consideration of cut through traffic, it also becomes a possibility for a pedestrian thoroughfare. Is that perhaps desirable in providing a well-lit and safe connection, or are there additional risks that are posed to the tenants of the building? It's too early to say on that basis, but when you have a mixed-use commercial at grade component, you're going to have people walking through the site anyway. So, in terms of having amenity areas that are open, I think it's an interesting proposition, but I don't know if there's any kind of thoughts on that from management side yet, because it will fundamentally be private property, which is another consideration.
Yeah, and I guess from the development side, we haven't turned our mind to that at this point. Just haven't gone through the zoning process, so something we can consider as we work through the next phases through the site plan.
Okay, and lastly, we have a comment from Heather. The look of the building and design are interesting. Thanks for recessing the balconies at the back.
Thanks, Heather. We appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so like I said, I do see there are some traffic related questions, but again, I'd encourage you to, well, number one, they've been noted by the panel, and number two, I would encourage you to submit your feedback to the city planner on the file, and you can also submit it to the development team. And given the time, we're almost at 8:30, an hour and a half. I think I'm gonna.
Alice?
Yes, go ahead,
Sorry,
Jeff.
I just want to make sure in terms of like how residents can most usefully feed into this process that we understand exactly where we are at this point. So if I may just describe what the process is, the developer has a piece of property. They want to build something that is larger than what the current zoning allows. So they have done their best to make a case in the planning rationale and through the studies that it meets what the official plan allows. And any zoning that's in place across the city has to adhere to the official plan. So they are making their argument through the planning rationale, through all the different studies, and they are trying to convince the city planner on the file of their case. As residents, you'll be sending comments to the city planner that in fact this building does not, or if you're supportive of it, that it does meet the intent of the official plan and all the various different policies that are in place to guide development in Ottawa. The city planner is going to consider all of those arguments as to whether or not this is compliant with the official plan, and then make a recommendation as to whether we should approve it or not to the Planning and Housing Committee and then to Council. Usually you won't see a refusal recommendation get to the point of politicians. Generally, the developer will make whatever modifications are being sought in order to turn it into something that the planner does consider they can recommend as compliant with the official plan. We'll vote on that at Planning and Housing Committee, and then we'll vote on that at City Council. So the arguments that you want to put forward now are going to be largely focused to the city planner to say this is or this is not compliant with the policies that guide development in Ottawa. And if you need help crafting those emails to the planner, making sure that the feedback that you're going to provide to the planner is legitimate and that it meets what the planner needs, Alice in my office will help you craft that either for or against to make sure that you can put your best foot forward. So take the information that you've heard this evening. You can talk to Alice, you can talk to me about what kind of feedback that you think might sway the city planner towards either recommending refusal or approval of this development. Once we get a recommendation, then your focus will turn to us, the politicians, and try to convince us to vote for or against the planner's recommendation.
Thank you, Jeff. So yeah, with that, I'm going to suggest that we wrap things up tonight. And I want to say thank you to FOTEN and the team for presenting and responding to the residents' questions. And I also want to say thank you to all the residents that took the time on this hot summer night to attend the open house tonight. So thank you. And just before we sign off, I just want to remind everyone that we will have the recording up on the Kitchissippi Board YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the week. And if anyone has any trouble finding the link or has any questions about it, please feel free to reach out to our office. You can reach us at jeff.leapier@ottawa.ca, or myself, I'm at alice.fife@ottawa.ca. And with that, I'm going to say thanks again to all and wish everyone a good evening. Thanks again. Good night.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.